Tonight, tragedy in the skies over the U.S. Capitol.
Crash. This is alert 3. Crash. This is alert 3.
What happened in the moments leading up to America's deadliest aviation disaster in more than 2 decades?
It was loud, it was unusual.
The investigation, how Canada is helping, and the U.S. president's baseless claims about the role of diversity initiatives in the crash.
The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities.
Who were the passengers on that doomed flight?
I feel for the athletes, the skaters, their families, but anyone that was on that plane.
How a former figure skating champion is remembering victims with Olympic dreams of their own. New tariff fears on the horizon. Is Canadian oil a target?
We may or may not. We're going to make that determination probably tonight on oil.
Plus, caught on camera, thieves find a frightening way to make a heist. And a welcome close encounter.
We just really lucked out to have one play with us for a while.
How BC divers captured this incredible video.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. They were elite teen figure skaters with dreams of gold, a newly engaged pilot, and a wife returning from a business trip with a husband that never got to pick her up at the airport. Among the 67 people now gone after their plane collided with a military helicopter. Tonight, the flight data and voice recorders from the plane have been recovered, and the urgent recovery mission continues. CTV Geneviève Beauchemin is on the banks of the icy Potomac tonight. Jen.
Yes, Omar, search for bodies and for answers continues on the river tonight. An all-hands-on-deck effort, say officials. Images show American Eagle flight 5342 seconds from landing. A Black Hawk helicopter on a training mission crosses its flight path, and a ball of fire lights up the Washington sky.
Crash. This is alert 3. Crash. This is alert 3.
The Midair crash plunged both aircraft into the icy Potomac River.
When we went to the roof, it was insanity. Police trucks, ambulances, command vehicles. This was something like I've never seen.
Search crews found the fuselage in waist-deep water, split in 3 pieces, and the Black Hawk nearby.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history.
There are no survivors, but a million questions about the crash involving a civilian and a military aircraft.
What I've seen so far, do I think this was preventable? Absolutely.
Reagan Airport is one of the most congested hubs in America, and there have been near collisions at busy runways before. But officials say leading up to the Midair crash, communications and flight paths were standard on a clear night. Less than a minute before the catastrophe, the control tower asked the helicopter pilots whether they can actually see the Bombardier CRJ-700.
CRJ in flight. This club has an aircraft in flight precision separation.
They radio back, yes, and are then told to pass behind the jet. The black box recordings from the plane have been recovered, and investigators will use them to try to find out what the pilots were actually looking at. Perhaps it was another passenger jet. They're also looking into why both aircraft were at the same altitude and whether staffing at the control tower was adequate.
We do not know enough facts to be able to rule in or out human factor, mechanical factors. That is part of the NTSB investigative process.
2 Canadian investigators have been deployed to help, and the NTSB has promised a preliminary report within 30 days to start to answer questions about this, the worst U.S. air disaster in nearly a quarter of a century. Omar.
Geneviève Beauchemin in Washington, where the president, without proof, blamed his predecessor's diversity initiatives for undermining air safety and playing a role in the crash.
The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiatives. Matters intellect, talent.
Trump also criticized Joe Biden's transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg.
Just got a good line of bullshit. He's run it right into the ground with his diversity.
On X, Buttigieg called Trump's comments despicable, adding that as families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. The loss of over a dozen competitive figure skaters on board that flight is hitting that community hard. CTV's Heather Wright on how they are remembering the victims.
A staggering loss of life and devastating blow to the figure skating community, with as many as 14 skaters aboard American Airlines Flight 5342, returning from the National Figure Skating Championships in Wichita. Among them, 16-year-old Spencer Lane, who had been taking part in a development camp held in conjunction with the championships. Lane was traveling with his mom and posted this picture on Instagram shortly before takeoff.
These kids and their parents, they're here at our facility in Norwood 6, sometimes 7 days a week. It's a close, tight bond, and I think for all of us, we have lost family.
6 of the passengers were affiliated with the Skating Club of Boston, including coaches Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Nomov, who won the pairs World Figure Skating Championships in 1994. The community there in mourning, including Olympic silver medalist Nancy Kerrigan.
I feel for the athletes, the skaters, their families, but anyone that was on that plane, not just the skaters, because it's just such a tragic event.
I'm going to Wichita. Sisters Lydia and Everly Livingston, just 11 and 14 years old, were also killed in the crash, which has impacted the tight-knit skating community around the world, including here in Canada.
We've been through this before in different situations, and so we're just kind of here for each other. We have some kids who are very tight with some of the victims of this tragedy.
Last night's tragedy bringing back memories of the 1961 plane crash in Belgium that killed the entire U.S. figure skating team. Other victims include friends returning from a hunting trip and, of course, the 2 pilots, who were both longtime flyers, according to their families. Omar.
So many victims with their entire lives ahead of them. Heather, thank you. And joining us now is CTV's aviation specialist, Phil Dirty. Phil, late this evening, we learned that the passenger jet's black boxes have been recovered from the chilly waters of the Potomac. What could they reveal?
Good evening, Omar. It's great that they found the black boxes, which will be located in the tail of the aircraft. I don't know what more information they're going to get from the black boxes because the aircraft was perfectly on profile until the last few seconds. So the only thing I can really see that would come out from the investigation was whether or not that helicopter was on the TCAS.
And there's still so many questions in that investigation about why the Black Hawk helicopter was flying at 350 feet when it should have been flying below 200. Also about staffing levels inside the control tower. But we do have some answers tonight about why the collision avoidance system, the TCAS you just mentioned, didn't activate.
Right. The TCAS system is an amazing tool to have on an aircraft because it shows you any aircraft are in the vicinity. So the TCAS has 2 distinct parts of it. First of all is traffic advisory. So if there is a conflicting aircraft that comes into the bigger bubble around the aircraft, then what will happen in the cockpit, they'll get an alert saying traffic, traffic. And then if the aircraft gets closer to a conflict, then it has a resolution advisory where the airplane will tell the pilots how to get away from the conflict. The resolution advisory is inhibited below 1,000 feet, and the traffic advisory is inhibited below 400 feet. That's why there was no caution heard in the cockpit.
So the plane flying too low for that system to trigger. All right, Phil, thank you for this tonight. Along with addressing the crash, the U.S. president also talked about tariffs set to kick in on Saturday and hinted at a possible exemption. CTV's Rachel Aiello explains.
I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada.
Donald Trump telling reporters at the Oval Office this afternoon that he's going ahead with tariffs on Canada and Mexico.
It's coming on the 1st, Saturday.
No oil tariff, no oil tariffs.
No, I don't. Well, I didn't say that. You said that. No. No, we may or may not. We're going to make that determination probably tonight on oil.
Trump cited unfair trade deficits and the flow of fentanyl and migrants at the border, suggesting Canada's attempts to sell the Americans on a new security plan haven't broken through. After Trump's commerce pick Howard Lutnick floated away to avoid tariffs yesterday,
this tariff model is simply to shut their borders.
Canadian officials launched a last-ditch lobbying effort, including Justin Trudeau's finance minister, texting a 3-minute video to Lutnick last night, illustrating Canada's efforts to beef up border security. The video that the government is not releasing opens with drone footage of a quiet scene, according to a source that's seen it. Bracing for a massive economic impact, Ontario Progressive Conservative leader Doug Ford says Canada needs to be ready to immediately implement a strong and forceful response. The federal government has been preparing a 3-phase retaliation plan and a domestic stimulus package, reviving pressure for Parliament to be recalled.
Let's pass legislation that supports workers, because we're going to have an election in the spring.
The government has signaled it would be ready to roll out counter tariffs as soon as Trump strikes. But they'd wait to see the scale of the impact before tabling any support measures for Canadians in the House of Commons. Omar?
Rachel, thank you. The field of candidates vying to replace Justin Trudeau as the Liberal leader narrowed today. Jaime Batiste, who made history as the first Indigenous candidate to run for the job, has dropped out, endorsing Mark Carney. 5 hopefuls remain in the race, with the new leader chosen on March 9th. Affordability will be a key issue for whoever becomes Liberal leader, but the price of food staples like vegetables may not be so easy to influence. CTV's Adrian Gobriel explains.
Feeding hungry mouths is a way of life at Right Way Farm. This area used to grow a wider variety of produce. Sitting on 250 acres, nowadays farmer Ryan Wright focuses on what turns a profit for the international market.
Corn, soybeans, wheat. We grow a little bit of mixed grains like oats and barley, and then we grow hay and other forages for the cattle.
The little he does grow for grocery stores isn't currently for Canadian consumption.
Last year we actually grew food grade soybeans, so they're an IP, non-GMO bean, so they're food grade bean. They go for the Asian market. We got to make an income and pay the bills just like everyone else.
Farmers across Canada sell and ship a large portion of what they grow. Simply put, it's more lucrative. Here at this greenhouse in Leamington, Ontario, approximately 80% of the peppers behind me are destined for the United States.
Within a day's drive, we can reach approximately 58% of the U.S. consumers.
Statistics Canada reports that in March 2024, more than $36 million worth of peppers grown in Canada were shipped to the U.S. In turn, Canadian grocers import billions worth of produce from the United States each year. Agriculture experts say it's cheaper for Canada to buy much of its produce from south of the border, though potential tariffs could turn once fruitful trade deals sour.
These peppers won't be ready to be picked until the middle of March. By then, we could be in the midst of a tariff war that has to be a concern.
Absolutely. How can you not be? Our growth trajectory could be potentially stymied.
Those we spoke with say it's time Canada begins to look at growing other trading partners, diversifying our crops, while becoming less reliant on the U.S. for low-cost produce.
Another example of how reliant we are on the United States for a variety of our produce. Take lettuce as an example. 90% of our leafy greens are imported, with the majority coming from the U.S. Omar.
Adrian, thank you. We have been seeing a spike in smash and grabs across major cities, and tonight there's dramatic video from Toronto. A pickup truck can be seen repeatedly ramming into a jewelry store as masked suspects try to break in. They failed and fled in another vehicle. The store owner suffered minor injuries. And police in Saskatchewan are sounding the alarm tonight on a gadget used to prevent theft and could be having the opposite effect. CTV's Allison Bamford explains.
The tracker was actually up in behind the wheel here.
A place Dalen Betcher wouldn't have looked if he wasn't doing work on his truck.
And I just happened to catch them out of the corner of my eye. It was kind of a miracle, to be honest with you.
Hidden inside the fender, these 2 GPS trackers wrapped in black tape. Following a months-long investigation, Saskatoon police have recovered 7 trackers from multiple vehicles, all found inside the fender, and believe upwards of 30 could still be out there.
We have a lot to find. We'd like to find them before the batteries go dead, and we can establish a tracking pattern with them.
Police charged the suspect, 46-year-old Marty Shira, on several counts of harassment, mischief, intimidation, and fraudulent concealment. He was arrested just blocks away from where Betcher's girlfriend works.
Everyone always thinks it would never happen to me, but it can. And it did happen to me.
The couple says they've never met Shira, but now worries how much the suspect might know about them.
He knows everything about us now. He knows where she works, he knows where I work, where we both live. He knows where our friends live. our families.
GPS trackers have been linked to vehicle thefts and other crimes across the country, partly because they're easy to get. But Saskatoon police are still piecing together a motive.
It's not illegal to have a GPS tracker. It's just illegal to place a GPS tracker on somebody else's vehicle.
Shira was known to police, and a man with the same name and age was sentenced to 14 years for kidnapping and sexual assault back in 2003. But tonight, police say there's no threat to the public with the suspect in custody. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
Coming up.
Just trapped there with no writing materials, no stamps, no way to communicate.
How inmates are smuggling cell phones into Canadian prisons. A W5 investigation has discovered that thousands of cell phones are being smuggled into Canadian prisons each year. As W5's John Woodward explains, advocates say there's a way to stem the tide.
So today I'm going to talk about building resilient communities through healing.
Anyone who sees Dr. Rachel Fader lecture at Ottawa's Carleton University may not realize right away that her talk on the state of Canadian prisons comes in part from experience.
I was arrested in 2011 on drug charges.
She wore the blue and white uniform of the inmates of Grand Valley Institution for marijuana possession and breach of her house arrest.
I had lost everything. I thought my life was over at that point.
Then Fader was caught smoking pot in prison and put in solitary confinement for 32 days.
My experience in solitary confinement really highlighted how traumatizing and violent it is to restrict people from communication. I was just trapped there with no writing materials, no stamps, no way to communicate with any other people that I had been incarcerated with for years.
Fader had been a graduate student in psychology and joined the prison's Walls to Bridges program where she could keep taking university courses. The catch, everything was on paper. That's how it is in most prisons across the country. Internet access is simply not available or limited to only legal filings. Some jurisdictions allow internet for education. Only in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick are some inmates allowed tablet computers with supervised internet access. At least that's the official story. Numbers obtained by W5 show that around 5,000 cell phones were seized by corrections staff last year, most in the federal system and Quebec. In some cases, smuggled in by those same guards. That was Toronto rapper Top 5's explanation for how he shot this music video in prison. And romance scammer John Mulder may have used one to set up this online dating profile while he was in jail.
It is a very high priority for a lot of people in prison to be able to access the internet.
Paul Quick is a lawyer with Queen's University's Prison Law Clinic. He's launched a charter challenge pushing for supervised internet access, in part because he says inmates are all pushed into a thriving cell phone black market.
Do you want to have a system where the people who want to send an email are part of the same market as people who are wanting to run a criminal enterprise from their prison cell?
He points to other countries like Finland that allow internet access, something he says is crucial for rehabilitation.
People come out, and if they're not able to engage with the society around them, they end up going back.
Committing crimes, you mean?
Often, yeah.
So in a way, this is a public safety issue.
It's absolutely a public safety issue.
Canada's Correctional Service says they have started a digital education pilot project to give people foundational computer skills, but it has no internet access. Fader believes her rehabilitation would have been faster if she'd been able to take courses online or send email to family.
It would have made a huge difference. I think I would have got in a lot less trouble, and it would have eased my transition when I was released.
A transition that is going well by all accounts. She got her PhD in December.
W5's John Woodward. Still ahead. 2 stranded astronauts take a stroll in space. Two stranded NASA astronauts have taken their first spacewalk together, floating outside the International Space Station almost 8 months after moving in.
It's clear right now. 15 in, and I can leave to the left.
Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore did some maintenance on the station's exterior. The pair was expected to stay just a week when they arrived at the space station last June. But issues with Boeing's new Starliner capsule meant it had to return to Earth empty. They are scheduled to fly home on a SpaceX flight in late March or early April. A leading voice in the British invasion of the pop charts, Marianne Faithfull, has died.
I hear is the sound of rain falling on the ground.
Faithfull was a teenager with her first smash single, As Tears Go By. It was co-written by Mick Jagger. Faithfull died today in London. She was 78. Still ahead, how divers got up close and personal with this marine mammal. A BC diver was overjoyed he hit record as he encountered a new underwater friend he didn't expect. Here's CTV's Andrew Johnson on what he captured.
They're sometimes called the golden retrievers of the sea, and not just because of that bark.
Encounters with any like seals or sea lions, they're just my favorite, right? Because they're such, it's like you've got this massive dog that's really curious.
That curiosity fueled an incredible encounter this week. John Roney and his buddies were looking for octopus. They found stellar sea lions.
We just really lucked out to have them want to play with us for a while.
Playing included nibbling on one diver's fin.
Very much in the same way that a playful dog might kind of like gnaw on you, and like there's no aggression in that behavior. Not to say it would never happen.
The animals are huge. Roney figures these ones are pushing 450 kilograms. That's about 1,000 pounds.
They're so close to grizzly bears, right? Their skeletons are so similar. They weigh more than grizzly bears, the adult males.
Sea lions have been hogging the spotlight in BC. This encounter comes only a few weeks after somewhat of a sea lion saga, also on Vancouver Island, in the most unusual of spots, the center of the highway.
Honestly, I think there's something going on with this animal.
The anxiety-inducing sea lion who made his way from the ocean, up a river, into a lake, and then repeatedly showed up in the middle of a nearby road.
It's really dangerous. You can imagine 300-pound dark animal on a highway at night.
The Vancouver Aquarium sent a team to try to get this guy to safety, but he was never spotted again, hopefully making his way back to the open ocean. Joining this gregarious gang above and below the surface. Andrew Johnson, CTV News.
And that's a snapshot of this Thursday. Heather's here tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching and good night.